We're going to talk about inspecting to the InterNACHI Standards of Practice. So I know a lot of you may be in licensing states. Here in Colorado, it is actually not a licensing state for home inspectors. So InterNACHI certification is something that I wear with a lot of pride. I have a lot of other additional things as well. So like moving forward here, I'm an InterNACHI certified professional inspector. I'm a certified master inspector. I have multiple certifications, including a BPI, building analyst, some ICC certifications for both building inspections and energy code compliance. And in addition to that, I am a HERS rater, which is through ResNet for more energy code stuff. As AJ mentioned, if you ever do want to come out, Boulder is a very nice place in Colorado as well. So we have the InterNACHI House of Horrors there. And I've actually, I teach classes there about 4 times a year. I do have one lined up for February. So that's going to be the next one coming up. And as I said, I'm the owner of Iron Phoenix Inspections here in Aurora, Colorado. So what we're going to talk about today, what the InterNACHI Standards of Practice are, how we conduct inspections according to those standards, examples of real material defects. I feel like that's a very important thing, and how exceeding the standards can add value. Everybody comes from different walks of life, different trade paths or what have you, so you may have a stronger emphasis in things. So how you exceed the standards is really how you can distinguish yourself as an inspector. So that's something that's pretty important. So InterNACHI, as you all may know, is the world's leading association for home inspectors, setting an industry benchmark. The standards of practice define what's inspected, what isn't inspected, and the level of detail expected during the home inspection. These standards establish a clear framework for consistency, provide consumer protection and transparency, and serve as a foundation for high quality and ethical inspections. So it's always good to be able to tell people that you perform an inspection to a standard. Since people aren't licensed where I'm at, even if they're not going to use me as an inspector, I say, make sure that you do use a certified inspector. That way you know that they're at least inspecting to a standard. So that's something that I always like to tell people that I come across. So the SOP, scope and limitations, what's included, structural components, roofing, exterior, foundation, HVAC, plumbing, electrical systems, interiors, insulation, ventilation, appliances. What's not included, code compliance verification. Code changes so much, so the reason we have a standard is to kind of set ourselves apart from having to do code compliance. If a house was built in 1967, could have aluminum wiring, no GFCIs. Those are things that will be safety items, but now we don't have those things as a part of code. So, it's really a standard of practice approach instead of code compliance approach. We don't look for cosmetic or aesthetic issues, hidden or inaccessible areas, inside walls, behind furniture, and then specialty systems, alarm systems, sprinkler systems, speakers, things like that. Those aren't things that we actually inspect or are not a part of the standards of practice. So the material defect is a concept that I always like to really bring to my client and discuss with other inspectors as well. A material defect is a specific issue with a system or component of a residential property that may significantly affect its functionality or structural integrity, that can pose a safety hazard to occupants or negatively impact the property's value or marketability. So these are plumbing leaks, cracked cast iron drainage pipes in crawl spaces, material defect, electrical hazards, overheating breakers, open junction boxes, things of that nature. large structural cracks that may require engineering work, roof failure, missing safety components. Those would all be material defects. Cosmetic blemishes, wear and tear, minor, easily repairable issues that don't impact function or safety are things that we're not going to consider material defects. So when I prepare to do an inspection, this is how I actually manage and set those expectations when I'm dealing with the client. So what I'll do is I'll step forward and I'll say, hello, I'm Shawn, I'm your inspector today. When it comes to home inspections, there are three kinds of defects we can find. We can find things that are serious, detrimental to your health and safety, or it could cost you a lot of money. Number two would be things that you may need a contractor to help you fix, not quite immediate, but it's on the radar. Number three is the honey-do list, the stuff that'll keep you busy on the weekend. So, but really what we're looking for today are those health and safety items, big ticket issues. Those are the material defects. And the way I like to manage those expectations is if we're at an inspection together and the client says, hey, it looks like we're missing a screw in this return register up here. I'm like, oh, you can get one of those at Home Depot on the weekend and kind of, twist that in. That's on the honey-do list, kind of helps manage those expectations. So moving along, the walkthrough would be the actual inspection, the on-site walkthrough. And then the summary with the client and agent communication. Now, and then the inspection report. So I'll talk to communication a little bit. When it comes to the communication piece, I feel like we're in the communication business. That is the most important part of how we interact with our client, because we're going to have to be able to tell them verbally, hey, this is what's wrong. This is what's going on. You don't want to be too alarming. Anything can be fixed. It's always about how much it may cost to fix it. I'm going to be here for 3 hours. I'm going to give you a maximum effort, but you're going to be here for 30 years. We don't know if you're going to want to be here for that long. So, those are the kind of things and approaches that you can have when you're talking to your clients, but you want to give them that maximum effort and that excellent communication as far as the defects that you may uncover. As far as the inspection report goes, it has to be in black and white, detailed, understandable. The best inspections for me are the ones where they don't have to call with questions about the report because it was so clearly and readily defined. And then when you have that verbal communication and the inspection report to reinforce that, boom, it's like hitting a home run. Those are just great things. So, moving forward, I'd say, oh, too fast. We'll actually start talking about some of the components of this inspection. So the first thing that I always like to start with is the roof. What we inspect as part of the SOP would be the roofing materials, flashings at penetrations and transitions, drainage systems, including gutters and downspouts, and the visible roof structure, which would be from the attic, of course, if it's accessible. So common defects we may find on a roof. This is a roof I was on probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. These shingles over here were really kind of messed up. And that looked to be because of, I think there may have been like some raccoons or something, because the way that this boot was destroyed on this plumbing vent didn't look like it was a natural occurrence either, So those are some things that I've recently found in roof inspections. I did put a chimney in here for good measure, because a lot of times I'll see some of these chimney caps deteriorate, and that can be a source of leakage into the home. But also, it's good to have a spark arrestor on top of this. We have a lot of dry climate stuff here in Colorado, so we don't want to have any sparks come out of there and set that pile of leaves on fire and things like that. So those are things that I'll actually convey. But, as far as material defects are concerned, missing, damaged shingles, improper, deteriorated flashings, um, gutter damage or clogs, evidence of ponding or poor drainage on those low slope roofs, like flat roofs and things of that nature. And then nail pops and exposed fasteners, anything that can, cause a leak into a roof. So this is the roof part two. And this is to just kind of further explain a portion of this SOP. The InterNACHI SOP only requires the inspector observe the roof. Walking it is not required. So inspections can be performed from the ground, from a ladder, using other accessible things. Some people use one of those long poles with the camera on the end of it to inspect the roof. I've actually become a licensed drone pilot. So I like to fly my drone to inspect some roofs if they're 30 to 50 feet high or things like that. Um, I'll actually fly my drone. And this is actually from, I think, November. I flew my drone over this particular home. And these shingles here, they don't match. Obviously, looks like there are some repairs or things like that. So being a detective, as we have to be at certain times as an inspector, um, I actually went into the bathroom and I discovered that there was moisture, you know, possible moisture with my thermal imaging camera, but I confirmed it with the moisture meter. And those are the fan terminations that actually look like they were a problem. So those are things that we're looking for, roof leakage, things of that nature. So that's the roof in a nutshell. You don't have to walk it, but you do have to inspect it. So that's a very important component. So inspecting the exterior, um, what we inspect, the siding, cladding, and trim. So I actually have some trim here that is badly deteriorated. This is actually on a patio and it's like butted right up against the house. So sometimes they'll put a patio in after the fact, and you're not supposed to have siding or anything that could wick up moisture within 6 inches of grade, of exterior grade. So those are things that get damaged pretty badly. But sometimes it could just be a window trim. Oftentimes I'll use my moisture meter to kind of observe and find that those are pretty badly damaged as well. Um, Other things that we like to look at are decks, balconies, steps, and railings. So actually, this particular deck right here, um, I was actually doing an inspection. This is several years ago, and this was a really nice house, but this deck was literally pulling away from this house. And they showed up about 8 deep to this inspection. There was like a big family that's going to purchase this house. So um, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to have a party with like 70 or 80 people. And, that's the first thing that I always tell people is, hey, this deck safety thing is very important. And if you have it pulling away from the house, that's the number one place that a deck could fail is at the ledger board. Not being properly fastened. There were actually joists that were pulling out, things of that nature. And it's great to understand the way that the girders and beams are supposed to be supported. Um, you know, just to make sure that it's safe. So these big second floor decks, even on brand new homes, it can be so easy to take for granted the way they're put together. But the truth is, I walked up a home that was built in 2024, and those stairs they kind of shook pretty badly. I don't think they made them for a 250-pound man. So those are just things to kind of keep in mind, inspecting those decks and making sure that the guardrails are sturdy as well as the stairs, things of that nature. Um, Negative grading is another uh, really big thing here. Anywhere you want to make sure that the house kind of sits like a house on the hill. and that the water kind of sheds away from it. So that's extremely important. Um, so I've actually seen tons of crawl spaces that have lots of water in them because it's improperly graded. So when you show up to an inspection on a nice sunny day, it's not always going to be evident that there's a problem with the grading. So I always like to take pictures, um, and I always like to kind of look at the way that it's sloped, the way that it sits. Um, that's a very important component to kind of inspecting the exterior. So um, now, when I do exterior inspections, the electric panel here in Colorado is usually outside, um, and that's part of it. So I'll walk around and just kind of go into the electric panel as well. The electric panel, of course, is not the only electrical component that we're going to inspect during the inspection, but it's one of the focal points for sure. Um, the main panel and the sub panel visual inspections are something that we have to do. Readily accessible outlets, lighting, switches, ground fault circuit interrupters, and arc fault circuit interrupters, wherever those are present. Of course, ground faults are required in bathrooms, kitchens, exterior locations at certain dates throughout time, but of course, I always make sure that they're in the places that they should be for safety, so people don't get shocked. Those are shock protection. Arc fault circuit interrupters or AFCIs, I typically see those inside electric panels as breakers. And arc faults protect against arcs. If someone wants to hang a picture up and they put a nail through the actual circuit, um, it's going to trip that breaker so that it doesn't start a fire. And fires have drastically reduced since arc fault circuit interrupters have come into play. So those are really good breakers to have, and they're going to be in a lot of newer homes, from like the early 2000s to now. I see them in every box that I do on new builds nowadays for sure. And then, of course, general wiring conditions. Um, this picture right here is actually aluminum wiring in a home that was built in the 60s. I'm pretty sure there were a few double tap neutrals in there. Um, I've seen a lot of bad aluminum wiring over the years. But aluminum wiring can be a danger if it's not properly treated. They do have ways that they can correct it, but it's something that we don't use anymore for single strands on, I guess, 120 amp circuits or 120 volt circuits because we don't want to have that heat and cool down, and it can be a fire hazard. I'll just put it lightly or put it quickly. So common defects that we'll find electrically: double tap breakers and double tap neutrals, open grounds and reverse polarity. Of course, we'll find those with our circuit testers. In addition to open grounds and reverse polarity, I want to add false grounds to the game. Not sure if you all have heard of those. And I don't have show and tell. I actually left my circuit tester in the truck, but there is a circuit tester that can help you find a false ground. Sometimes people who flip houses will try to deceive inspectors and kind of run a jumper wire from a neutral down to a ground from an outlet to give them the illusion that there's a ground when there's not. I've seen these in short-term rentals and things like that before. Can be unsafe. And I'm talking about short-term rental in the bathroom. So imagine somebody being shocked in the bathroom in a short-term rental because someone wanted to cut corners. So those are just things to be aware of, and that's an additional tool to add to your tool belt. A bit above the standard, but still something to kind of keep people safe. Um, Overfusing and undersizing wiring. Um, So overfusing is something that I actually see a lot of times if someone has an air conditioner that they got that's recently been installed, and it may require a 25 amp breaker, but the HVAC contractor did not put a 25 amp breaker in. So the maximum amperage is supposed to be 25 amps, but they still have like a 40 amp breaker inside the panel. So that's kind of where you can overfuse. And if that, AC runs up to 35 amps or something like that, it can burn up the circuitry before the breaker actually trips. So that's something where there could be a danger. Um, Undersized wiring, making sure you have the proper size wire gauges inside of the particular breaker. That's a very important component. Uh, Outdated or unsafe panels and brands. So, Federal Pacific, a very popular brand that is not uh, reputed to be very good, as well as Zensco. So, those are things I always call out. I know I mentioned aluminum, but when it comes to the electric panel, this just to give you a SOP reminder. InterNACHI SOP does not require inspectors to remove a dead front cover to inspect the box, to inspect a panel. So when it's safe and appropriate, most of the time I do go beyond the SOP and remove it and inspect the internal panel conditions. A lot of times, if it's a Federal Pacific panel, especially recently, I've said, I'm not going to take the front off of this because it could be a bit more dangerous. And then there are these situations where a home was built in 1967 and it has a Federal Pacific panel. So it could be the best of both worlds. It could be a Federal Pacific and it can have aluminum wiring. So taking off a dead front cover, definitely the top two of the most dangerous things I do as an inspector. Um, the other one would be actually walking on a roof. So, just so you know, the SOP does not require you to do either one of those things. And you just hope that whatever you convey in the report as a potential danger, that they're actually going to get an electrical contractor to check it out. So those are some things to kind of keep in mind when it comes to electrical.
We do have a couple questions, Shawn,
Okay,
or just
perfect.
for your opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a question in the chat. So, is aluminum wire single strand? Is it a deficiency? Some say yes, some say no. What do you think?
I believe it is a deficiency. And the reason I say yes is if it's a single strand aluminum wire for 120 amp or 120 volt circuit, we don't use that anymore. Like if there's someone who needs, if it's a dryer or something like that, like a dedicated appliance, they will still use single strand aluminum wire. But the fact that we don't use it anymore because it's caused so much damage and so many fires, I do believe it's a defect. Yes.
And how do we identify? How do you identify a false ground?
So identifying a false ground, and I wish I had brought my tester in here, but there's actually a tester that you can get, and the one that I got, I may have to show you. Put my phone up to the screen so I can show you. Um, but uh, you can actually use a special tester that will tell you if there's a false ground. And I don't do it on every single home, okay? And there are telltale signs. Like once again, you have to be a bit of a detective. If you go to a panel and you open it up and you see that there's just hots and neutrals and there are no grounds in there, but somehow magically you get into the house and every single outlet is grounded. It's like, these may be false grounds. And those are going to be houses like that were built in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Um, and then I'll use the tool to confirm that it's a false ground. But like, it's one of those things where Um, I tell people all the time, I grew up in a house with two-prong outlets, and I turned out just fine, you know. But there are people trying to get the illusion that it's not a two-prong outlet by putting that false ground in there, and it can fry your electronics, and if it's next to a water source, it could shock somebody. So those are things that are important. You don't want to, gloss over it. But that's how I identify it. I'm probably over talking, but yeah, that's what I got. Do we got any other ones?
Not as of now. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna move on into the interior. So this is where I spend a great deal of my time, and I feel like I probably reduced some of this information. But going into each bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, common spaces. We're looking at interior doors, walls, ceilings, floors, stairs, handrails. Electrical is thrown in here because we are going to be testing all the outlets with our circuit testers, checking the function of windows, getting in the attic and looking at the insulation condition, the condition of the structural framing, things of that nature. Also, ventilation, things like that. Um, you know, this is a photo of a missing handrail in the upper right corner here. Um, so, handrails are important. This is only about 4 or 5 steps. I see very long runs of steps without handrails. So, that's just a small detail, but still very important, especially for young children or elderly people. Um, this window actually has this metal rod here, which is called a channel balance. I see this channel balance all the time, um, not properly working in a window. So if one of them fails, it's a hardware problem, and I'll put it in the report. If both of them fail, the whole window sash, the whole like half of a window can just come slamming down, and somebody can break their hand. So those are things that I see oftentimes in windows that I like to call out. The foggy windows by the standards of practice, that is something that we are supposed to call out, and of course I do. But this is one that, it's a functionality failure, and it's something that I don't think it's touched on as much. And sashes, just different kinds, are can always be a problem. So that's something I like to put a point of emphasis on with some of these windows. In the attic, uh, you know, I was in an attic earlier today. There was an open junction box without a cover on it. Wires just kind of hanging out. It's probably about 2 feet away from a gable vent. And the person who's buying this house is an electrician, and he says, "Are there wire nuts on it?" I'm not scared of that, which is fine. I tell people all the time, I'm the worst case scenario guy. He's not scared of it until a squirrel climbs in there or something, and it starts a fire. I don't know, but those are things that we may find in an attic. Open junction boxes. This is actually a plumbing vent that was actually just exhausting into the attic. So, um, and plumbing vents, that's going to probably create some kind of odor or something like that. Something I see all the time, much more, are actually like exhaust vents from bathrooms or kitchens and things like that. And they can actually cause mold because they're blowing that moisture from that hot shower up onto your roof decking. So, it's important to kind of look for those things in the attic and make sure that they're properly documented. And like I said, the interior, a huge space that we spend a lot of time in, it encompasses a whole lot. So that kind of scratches the surface. Um, this could be included as well. Appliances and fireplaces within interior spaces. You know, um, Checking the oven, this particular one, like there's nothing wrong with this, right? But the picture that you have is the picture of the oven off. And that is a picture that is included in every single one of my inspection reports because I take a picture of it functioning in the areas that it functions, bake, stovetop, broil, and off, because I always want people to know that I turn the oven off. So that's an important component. The fireplace is another big point of emphasis. So um, what's wrong with this picture is there's no hearth in front of this fireplace. This is a wood burning fireplace. Sometimes people will do these flips and they will just run this laminate flooring right up to the fireplace. And you should have a 6x6 hearth that's made of like stone or tile or something, so that if something happens to jump out of this fireplace that's on fire, that it doesn't set your floor on fire. Um, I've seen carpet run straight up to a fireplace. That's a big no-no. Those are things that we want to make sure that we kind of have an eye and detail for, because it's a safety issue for sure.
Hey, Shawn, we do have a couple more questions before we get to the next slide.
Okay.
Going back to ladders, um, what size ladder do you recommend to get into attics here in Colorado, especially for the newer homes that may have access via the garage? I've seen those attics before, man. Those things are way up there. What do you do to get up those 20-foot up attic spots?
I have a little giant that is an extent, like it's a combination extension and A-frame ladder. I have a telescoping A-frame ladder. I have a couple different um, ladders to actually try to access that. So, and most of the times they are tall enough. I've come across probably one or two times when I didn't have a ladder that was tall enough to reach an attic space. And it probably was in a garage, to be honest with you, AJ. So that's what I do. And if I can't reach it, like I'll disclaim it. And I mean, and it's unfortunate, but most of the time I'll be able to get in the attic. I have, I think, a 16-foot telescoping A-frame ladder that I only use for attics, and then I have the little giant if I need something a little bigger. That's like a still a combination A-frame and extension ladder.
You don't fly your drone up there?
I have not done that. My drone doesn't have the muscles or the. If I need to get Go Gadget arms. I think that's the next thing I'm Inspector Gadget. I'm branding that. That's gonna don't nobody take my new company name.
All right, we got a couple more. Would a bathroom fan venting into the attic would be considered for correction or an evaluation? So, would a bathroom fan venting into the attic be considered for correction or evaluation?
Yes, I would consider that a material defect, and that is because it can cause that moisture and that potential mold. It can be a potential mold problem, and I've seen it where it actually is that. Um, but then in addition to that, like I think using your best judgment is important as well because some bathrooms may be a half bathroom and it's not going to have the same kind of moisture content. You know what I mean? Like, whereas if it's a bathroom that's has a shower in it, it's going to cause that problem. So, I mean, sometimes you do have to use your detective senses with that, but most of the time it is a material defect, in my opinion.
And do you need a hearth for natural gas fireplace? I'm probably saying that. But
So, natural gas, if it's direct vented, not necessarily. So, direct vented, of course, is if like you have the glass and it's closed off. Um, you know, a hearth is not really required, but like anytime you have an open fireplace where you can open it, or there's a way that those flames could jump out somehow. If there's not a hearth in front of it, I'm gonna call it out for sure.
all right, that seems to be all the questions we have for right now.
All right, perfect. Um, But yeah, I mean, the hearth is one piece of this fireplace, but the damper is another one. One thing I'll just throw in for good measure: if you have a if you have a wood burning fireplace, you want a damper to be able to open and close and all that good stuff. If you have a gas burning fireplace, you want no damper. And the reason why is because that pilot light can be running the whole time, and you know uh, that can be a potential carbon monoxide hazard because it's not exhausting. Or someone might flip the switch and the damper is closed, and then you just have all the exhaust coming right into your home. So if you see a damper inside a gas fireplace, which unfortunately I still find quite often, and I actually did an inspection probably about 2 weeks ago with like the scariest fireplace I've ever seen. They had it's like a damper, gas fireplace, and like the chimney is in the garage and it's pieced together with duct tape and it's in contact with drywall. It was just like, man, just throw it all away. So those are things just to keep in mind with fireplaces. They're a big, big safety thing. Um, so moving into foundation and structure. So everybody's got different locations. I mean, like I know in the South, you may not have as many basements or no basements, or you may have crawl spaces, you may have slab on grade. We do have a lot of basements and crawl spaces here. We have like a 3 to 4 foot frost line in Colorado. So we dig a little deeper. We also have expansive soils, which can wreck some foundations out here. Um, and, people get a little touchy about foundations. I'll kind of talk about the moisture piece first. We have sump pumps. Sump pump is a device installed in a basement or crawl space to remove water and prevent flooding. So, you may have perimeter drainage tiles that actually bring the water back into the sump pit and then it kicks the water out. We have a lot of those here in Colorado. Efflorescence is a white powdery substance that forms when water evaporates, leaving salt deposits. This is a telltale sign of moisture intrusion. So if I see that on concrete walls or CMU walls when I'm in a basement or crawl space, I know that they may have some type of moisture intrusion happening. Um, Window wells, and this is kind of a big one because we have these older homes that may not have window wells. They just have windows that are like equal with grade, and they have a basement still, or they have like a below grade space. And it's kind of one of those things. If you're doing an inspection in the springtime or the summertime, I always like to inform my client, hey, you don't have a window well here. There's a good chance that your basement could flood because all the water or all the snow is just going to sit up against your window, and that's not the way we want to do that. So those are things that I look out for. When it comes to foundation cracks, this picture on the right, this is an inspection I did probably about a month ago. They actually had like, and this picture doesn't do it justice. There's actually like a horizontal crack down here, and it's right below this beam. But when I got into the crawl space, they actually had like a card table or something like right in front of it. And the crack was so long that I could still see it on one side. But then I moved the card table and I'm like, wow, it was like uncovering the Mona Lisa or something. So it's like people get touchy about these things. And actually, on the opposite side of this crack in the garage, they had 2 bags of concrete sitting on the coinciding crack because it came all the way through the wall into the crawl space. So, being a detective, I mean, as an inspector, you don't have to move any furniture or move things out of the way to really be able to inspect things. But sometimes it's worthwhile for you to get that photograph to put in your report to say, hey, this is a problem. You don't have to say, hey, they were trying to hide this, but you can say, hey, I found this, because that can be an important thing, especially if it's a foundation crack. Um, Poor structural support. So this is actually just from last week. I actually inspected another home for this lady today because they ended up backing out of it. This was another hidden defect. They actually had a piece of fiberglass insulation sitting over this monstrosity that's holding a beam, and this beam holds the floor joist. Now, the home was built in 1920, but they have a shim, a couple two by fours, and then another two by four, strapped together. And of course, they're hiding it behind a piece of fiberglass insulation because they don't want me to see it. So, like, things like that. Anything that somebody could come downstairs and like you're moving something with your brother and you bump into it and then the floor caves in on you. You want to make sure that you're putting that kind of stuff in the report, and just have kind of a keen eye for it. I mean, wood in contact with soil that can deteriorate. Those are things that we look for in basements and crawl spaces. Inadequate piers. That's what I would fashion this as an inadequate pier. But inadequate beams or altar supports, those are things that we look for. And I mean, I would prefer a structural repair contractor or engineer give something like that their blessing than just to say, oh, that's okay, because sometimes it's really not. And we don't do any engineering work. So, as an inspector, we have to be so versatile in everything that we see. It's important to make sure that the structure has actually got some integrity. Um, and just kind of backing up on this foundation crack piece, there are different kind of cracks, shrinkage cracks versus, you know, differential settlement. Um, there's a lot of good information to kind of look at and read up on to see the difference. But, and I've seen engineers come out to scenes and they're like, oh, that's only moved 2 inches. I don't really think it's a problem till it's moved 7. And I'm like, wow, there's like, I could put my fist through that wall. You don't think it's that bad. You know what I mean? So, like, it's all subject to interpretation. We don't do engineering, but like that crack that he said is not that bad, I'm still going to think it's terrible because, it can uh, decrease the value of the house or be very expensive to repair. So, those are things that we're looking for structurally in a basement or crawl space.
Hey, Shawn, we got a few questions.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's see here. Do you inspect the chimney for creosote buildup? Any special tricks?
Um, for creosote buildup, not necessarily. No, I don't. I don't do in-depth chimney inspections. But I do have some good information I'm going to share about a chimney a little bit later, and I may just allude to it now because um, sometimes, like in this same house, they had a masonry chimney where they're actually exhausting a furnace into it, and there's no chimney liner. So that acid from that appliance is going to eat up the mortar, and it was like destroying this chimney. So like that's something that I'll see and I'll call out because I know that the appliance is destroying the chimney. If it's normal usage of a fireplace, I always defer to a chimney sweep or an expert or something like that because I don't do specific chimney inspections. There's education and different things you could do to take chimney inspection classes or be able to offer chimney inspections. I haven't went that route. So that's kind of my answer to that. I always say, you know, get it checked. Even if it looks great, I tell people get it checked because, there could be a bird's nest up there.
I've seen a couple birds come out while shooting home inspections.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you call out anti-tip over missing on a stove or other built-in? So if a stove is missing their anti-tip, would you call that out?
Anti-tip, I like to. It's one of those things I feel like it's so common, and then there are just so many different variables. If they bring their kids with them, absolutely. you know, because it's one of those things like it's that the kid trying to pull the Thanksgiving turkey out of the oven their self type of thing, where they're going to get on the door. So I do like to call it out. And it's in my report. I have a kid comment for it. So yeah, I do call out the NI2.
So since you're Inspector Gadget, do you use a crawl bot with modern basements here in Colorado that have floating subfloors and not concrete slabs? What's your method for testing sub pumps and already installed radon systems?
So I do not have a crawl bot. I'll get down there inside of that structural subfloor and look around to the best of my ability. Um, I'm a bigger guy, so when I say to the best of my ability, I don't army crawl from end to end. But I do get down there and check it out. Um, I have a Corona, um, which is like a three-tine hoe, like a hook device that I use to check sump pumps. And that's for the sump pumps with an accessible flow. By the standards of practice, if they don't have an accessible flow, we don't have to check them. But of course, I still document every sump pump. Um, and there was one more component to that question that I forgot. I'm sorry. Um,
What's your method for testing sub pumps or and already installed radon system? So
Radon, yeah. So testing radon systems, I'll look at the vacuum. We want to have like between a half inch to 1 inch vacuum column. Or water column, a vacuum. So I'll look and I'll see if that's there. And it varies. Like sometimes it's different. I don't particularly inspect. I have a canned comment in my inspection software that disclaims the radon mitigation system because it is beyond the standards of practice. And I just prefer people will get a radon test. I am licensed to do radon measurement and I have radon measurement equipment. So if they want to do a radon test, we can actually do that. And I mean, I've done radon tests a few this year where, they have a mitigation system and it still comes back high because people won't get a radon test every couple of years at like you're supposed to do. So, I mean, just because they have it and it looks like it's functioning well, doesn't necessarily mean that it is. Unless you actually do a radon test, you don't really know.
I think that's all the questions we have for now.
All right. Um, so the HVAC system, kind of moving into that. This is all in the same house, and this is kind of my process. I do like to check the registers, see what kind of temperatures we're getting. I do like to, this is the furnace. It looks really nice on the outside, and then I open it up, and there's tons of rust inside. So, checking the functionality, the age, the venting. Those are all important. This is an older lady living in a house by herself. So, this kind of deferred maintenance, she didn't know. And, just because it's a condensing furnace that's newer, doesn't mean that it's not going to fail prematurely. This one was less than 10 years old, but I've seen them less than 2 years old, and they're just terribly rusted inside because of craftsmanship. So, these are always things that we want to open up and check, or I like to open up and check. Um, and I would definitely consider this a material defect too. And that's just kind of a brief touch on the HVAC system. I do have more that I'll talk about a little bit later um, with some distinguishing factors. Plumbing systems. So, as far as plumbing goes, this pipe on the left is called polybutylene. It's gray and it has these copper crimps. This stuff has a reputation that fails so badly. Like there was a class action lawsuit for it in the 90s. So that says a lot about polybutylene. I definitely recommend that's called out in any inspection. Um, this in that same house with that furnace that we just looked at, this is her water heater. So that actually looks like a dielectric fitting, and somehow it's still rusted terribly. So, I mean, those are things that we definitely want to take into account when it comes to plumbing. This is a pressure regulating valve on a main water shutoff in the basement, and it was leaking terribly in a vacant home. So like those are things we always want to keep an eye out for. That kind of scratches the surface when it comes to plumbing. We talk about slopes and the way that pipes actually drain within crawl spaces, within basements, or any particular area. That's all very important as well. Um, so those are some things just to kind of talk about the concept of plumbing. So this is like a sample defect report, right? Now, on the right side, this is like what a portion of my summary would look like. You know, um, chimney flashing was poorly installed, which may allow water intrusion at roof penetration. Additionally, the chimney did not appear to have a proper liner despite being used to vent gas burning appliances. Recommend further evaluation and correction by a qualified chimney specialist for safety and code compliance. So I had another comment, which is actually right here. And this actually goes to the actual location in the report for like the HVAC. Oh no, my light went out. Sorry. Um, for like the HVAC. So a mid or high efficiency gas heater have been installed and fitted through an existing masonry chimney. Heater flue gas temperatures are lowered with these units causing condensate to collect on the chimney walls. This condensate contains acid that corrode, damage, deteriorate the chimney masonry. So, that could be considered overkill perhaps because it is the same essential defect for the same chimney on the same report. But like I just wanted to reinforce that, this chimney is a problem. This lady is in love with older houses. I did another one for her today, and the chimney has the exact same problem. Actually, it's leaning in the attic. So, you know, what can you do? I actually had a bathroom in an upstairs area of a home, and I use a thermal imaging camera on every single inspection. This was a flip, so I go up under this bathroom, and I see that it's discolored with the thermal imaging camera, and I confirmed with the moisture meter that it was leaking. So the wall was painted, it looks fresh, but you know, no one would have known it was there until unfortunately like water falls through your dining room ceiling. So, this is one way that I like to exceed the standards of practice. Um, the last concept I'd like to share about kind of exceeding the standards of practice is a combustion appliance zone. This is where the furnace and water heater typically live. I also do home energy audits, so we have to do CAS testing, which is combustion appliance zone testing. So safe CAS components, adequate combustion air, proper venting, no competing exhaust fans. Unsafe components, bad locations like bedrooms or bathrooms, inadequate combustion air, improper venting. These are all things that could be a problem. So, with that being said, I had a client who was buying a home. His name was Kevin. I had this bathroom with an exhaust fan, a dryer. Um, the furnace and water heater were in the closet. There's no combustion air. So what can happen is that negative pressure can actually pull the exhaust gases back into that bathroom. So I'm like, Kevin, imagine you have a teenage daughter. He says, I have two. I'm like, okay, so imagine she's taking a shower and her clothes are washing and she has the fan on. And while she's in the shower in the dead of winter, so the furnace is running and the water heater comes on, you can actually have exhaust gases come back in here and cause carbon monoxide poisoning or something like that while she's in the shower. Now he ended up still buying the house, and I don't say these things to scare people, but I want him to be able to explain to his daughter how important it is that that could be a problem, and why we don't really allow there to be furnaces and water heaters in bathrooms anymore, because there's a lack of combustion air. and you can actually have, you know, those exhaust gases come in, and if somebody's taking a shower, it just mixes with the steam, and that's just not a good recipe. Um, I have a radon awareness slide. It is pretty bluesy, but I'm not gonna play it. It's radon awareness month, so make yourself aware. And then some of our value added services: radon testing, sewer scopes, mold sampling, energy audits and HERS ratings, and construction code compliance for some of the things that I do. Um, I answered a few questions, but I do have a QR code if you'd like to follow any of my social media stuff, or um, you know, you like to connect with my website. Thank you very much for spending your Tuesday night with us. That's all I got.
Well, you do have a couple more questions. Shawn, what kind of thermal imaging camera do you have? What are you using?
I have a FLIR E6. So I got it a handful of years ago, but it's a really good camera.
All right. I think that's all the questions we have. Shawn, thank you for your time.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Happy New Year. And, you know, very grateful to be here. Thanks for having me. You know,